Alright, in this tutorial, this is about inverse trig functions. I'm going to explain to you exactly what an inverse trig function means, and then in a separate tutorial I'm going to actually show you an example of how to use it. So first of all, I want you to take a look at these three trig functions and notice that there's something different about them. They all have that little -1 as an exponent, and typically we know that if something is raised to a negative power, that it pushes whatever term that it is into a denominator. For example, let's say we have x to the -2nd power. I know that I can write that as 1 over x to the +2nd power. That's a rule that you learned in algebra. But this that we're looking at right now with these trig functions is not that. All that -1 means is that you're talking about an inverse function. And an inverse function asks you about all of the measures that are unknown. So you only use inverse trig functions when the measure of the degree or radian is unknown. So for example, let's say for cosine, I have the cosine, and then -1 means inverse, so the inverse cosine of 0. So what it's asking is, and this is a degree measure, so we're trying to figure out what the degree measure is. So the cosine of what value gives me 0? That's what this question is asking. So you can do this in your calculator as well. Above the cosine key, you will see a cosine of the -1 power. All you need to do is press the second button to get there. But since we are sophisticated and we already know all of our signs, I know that the answer to this question is going to be either pi over 2 or 90 degrees. And we always want to try to stick within the first and second quadrant, somewhere between 0 and 180 degrees, or between 0 and pi radians. So if you want to use degrees, that's fine. If you want to use radians, that's also fine. But your answer should always be between 0 and pi. All right, let's take a look at sine. So maybe I want to know what degree measure or radian measure for sine that gives me 0 as well. And I know that the answer to this is going to be between 0 and pi. One of our answers is going to be 0, and the other one is going to be pi. I actually have two answers to this. So which one do I use? And the answer to that is that you always want to use the one that's smaller. So I would, in this case, say 0. There you go. All right, let's take a look at tangent. So let's say I want to know the inverse tangent, and I have 0 for this one. And once again, I'm very sophisticated, and I know that the tangent of 0 degrees or 0 radians is 0. And I also know that that is true for pi as well. However, we only go with the smallest answer, so 0 is once again my answer for this. Now, all of these inverse trig functions go by another name. If you didn't want to write it with an exponent, you could also write it like this. For cosine, I would say arc cosine. And the arc part denotes the arc around the unit circle, since it has something to do with arc length. Sine would be arc sine, and tangent would be arc tangent, or arc tan. And you can do all of these also with all of the reciprocal functions. So I could have arc secant, and arc cosecant, and arc cotangent. So all I mean is that they're talking about an inverse function. And that concludes this tutorial.